Okay.
So thank you guys for coming in for our third session of a week of managed care. Today our special guest is Dr. Anandi Law. Virtual claps for her. Give her a nice warm welcome. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and introduce you. So Dr. Anandi V. Law is a professor and associate dean for assessment. She has been at Western University of Health Sciences since July 1999. She has a bachelor's in pharmacy from the University of Mumbai, India. She has a master's in pharmaceutics and a PhD in pharmaceutical administration. Both of these are from Ohio State University, Columbus. She teaches health systems and practice management in the PharmD program. Also, she oversees the Exploring Leadership and Self-Awareness, or ELSA, curriculum at Western U. Her research is mainly focused on health outcome measurement, whether it be clinical, economic, and patient-reported outcomes, in medication adherence, safety, and satisfaction. She also focuses as well as pharmacists' roles in improving medication use outcomes. Dr. Law has several grants and more than 75 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters in areas of interest. She is active in professional associations such as APHA, AACP, and ISPOR, and serves on the editorial advisory board of 4 peer-reviewed journals, and as editor-in-chief of JCPHP and associate editor of RSAP. She is a graduate of the Academic Leadership Fellows Program through AACP in 2010 and was named Fellow of APHA in 2013. Dr. Law is a certified yoga instructor, and she runs the elective on meditation, mindfulness, and yoga. All right. Wow.
Thank you, Mallory.
Quite the credentials.
Oh, thanks.
So I'm
You've
gonna
been
go.
around as long as I am with gray hair, so.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. First off, I want to ask you to tell us a little about your company you work for and your position in particular.
So you guys all know Western U, you're all here, so you know a lot about it. But what you may not know is at the beginning, at Western U, a lot of us who've been here, kind of since the late 90s, which is Dr. Prabhu, Dr. Ambrose, myself, Dr. Obar, Dr. Chung, and Dr. Scott. I mean, we're still here. So we kind of, carried the school through a lot of initial moments where we were setting up the curriculum, we were teaching classes all over the place. We were setting up a research program. So we kind of came into a school which was in its infancy, and we've been and seen the growth, across. I've been here 21 years, so we've seen a lot of growth. So the advantages of being in a new school like that, a new program, is you get to build, you get to grow. And of course, the cons are that you take a lot of weight, pull a lot of weight from various areas, and also there is turnover in new schools, so you have to weather various storms, but you learn a lot. So that's about the school. And then about my current role. So just to kind of give you a brief history, and I'll make it short. In academia, you begin as an assistant professor usually, and that's the lowest in the totem pole. And then you have to work your way to associate professor. And that takes about 6 years, so that you have to demonstrate that you are a really dedicated and high quality educator, which means teacher, preceptor, right? Scholar, which means you have a lot of research, and mentor. And in places like for our practice faculty, also to show that you're an excellent clinician. And in addition, that you are participating and you are highly collegial in terms of committees, what you do for the profession and for professional societies. So you have like a dossier you build, and you have to document that every year. But in the 6th year, the end of the 5th year, you turn it in. A committee reviews it. It's called a PNT committee also, but not pharmacy and therapeutics. It stands for promotion and tenure. So they review it, and then if they think you're good, they recommend. You also have external reviewers write letters. So you have to really show that you're in the top about 10% in the country in your area. So you have externals who write the letters, and then you get promoted, and in our case also tenured, which means you are permanent at the university because of your research and your ability to get in money and also to impact future generations. So that takes about 6 years. And then, so by 2005, I was tenured. And then in 2007, the dean was new then, Dr. Robinson, and he asked me to take over as the department chair for pharmacy practice and administration, a role which Dr. Don Su is now serving. So I was in that role for about 10 and a half years, from 2007 until 2018 when I got off. And so that was an administrative role I was in. And so that is involving basically helping all the practice faculty who teach you mostly in the second and third years, kind of helping their careers, helping build their careers, and facilitating it. So that went on until 2018, and then we had another associate dean for assessment who decided to retire in the early 2018, and the dean said, "You got to take this up." And so once again, I took on a role which I was asked to. And my current role is assessment. And assessment is really, I mean, you guys know what assessments are. I mean, you do your exams and quizzes where we assess you for how well you know the material, right? But now we also need to know if all the things we do in the college, are they really helping improve our outcomes? Okay. For example, we have all these exams which we give you guys, and different kinds of interactive sessions, learning, OSCEs. We have like the top hat in class. We have ExamSoft. So we have the curricular things, and then we also have the skills you guys build. Then you go and do your professionalism development curriculum. So we have different components, right? Now we have built all this, but how do we know it's working? So we need somebody who's assessing it. So Dr. Chung does all the assessments of how the exams, how you guys are featuring, how you're working on the, I mean, how you're performing on the exams. But we also need to know, once you get done, now you're going on rotations, right? Are you ready for rotations, right? So we need some assessment of that. Then once you get into rotations, you know, at the end of rotations, then you'll be taking your board exam once you graduate. How well have you, you know, now learned the material, so now you can pass your boards, right? So we are monitoring from admission all the way to graduation, and we want to make sure your performance is great, because if there is something which tells us, oh no, the students are not performing well, then we start analyzing why, right? Or if our students are all 100% board passed, we're like, whatever you're doing is working. Right? So it's a continuous quality improvement. So we need to assess what's going on with the students. And then not only the students, right? Because you guys are impacted not only by the instruction you get, the teaching techniques, but also the classroom, the physical facilities. What kind of facilities you have, what kind of instructors you have, what kind of campus environment. I mean, there's so many different things. So what our accrediting body does is, has you analyze it yourself. So we analyze, we self-study ourselves and say, what are the different components which lead to our success, and how much do they contribute, and how can we help that process and structure? So if there is no Wi-Fi in the college, it's going to impact you, right? I mean, simple things like that we don't even think of. But if your desks are not properly situated, you can't plug in your data ports, that's going to be an issue. So constantly evaluating every aspect. How are you getting student loans? What is the tuition? Are you guys able to make it? So whether it's financial, physical, structural, we analyze everything to see how our program is doing. How good are our faculty? Do they come in with credentials? What are their evaluation scores? How do they do in their research? So we're looking at the entire university. We're looking at the College of Pharmacy governance. We look at the physical structure, facilities, finances, faculty quality and quantity, staff quantity and quality, administrators, student performance, student progression, complaint policies. So we examine every single thing to see how we are doing. And that's my role, to kind of look at everything and make sure that everybody is continuously improving quality, measuring their own quality, and making sure that we're on top on everything. So that's really what the assessment individual does in any school of pharmacy. We're constantly monitoring. That's a long answer to a short question.
So then you focus on all these things. How does that or what is what exactly is weighed more heavily in terms of determining how well the outcomes are in terms of what you're teaching? Like, do you mostly look at the boards and be like, we have such a great pass rate, everything we're doing is great, or is it like everything is kind of equal?
So it's a good question. So really what we have to do is examine what are the important aspects for you to perform well on your boards, right? So how well you're doing throughout the curriculum. So we look at, say, P1 first quarter, second quarter. So we're looking at the grades along the way, and we actually trend your grades throughout the curriculum. And so several offices do it. So Dr. Chung's office, like in the curricular affairs, does it. Dr. Prabhu's office, so academic affairs. So what they monitor is, how students are doing, who's struggling, and then we have the supporting students success program. So we are examining all those components which lead to performance. Student grades, we also look at things like your admitting GPAs. So we found that science GPAs correlate very highly. So what's the entering science GPA? And then, how have you done on your communication or other aspects when you were entering? Then we could document your P1, P2, P3, rotation performance, and we look at all those, and then we try to correlate it with your NAPLEX pass rates. So, and then we figure out, so we run a regression equation, and some of you may all know what that is, but we run a regression equation where we have the dependent variable is, say, your NAPLEX pass rates, which we define as success or CPJE, any of those, and we have various levels. And then we say, what are the different components which go into it, and how do you succeed? So when it comes to NAPLEX pass rates, we generally look more at your performance. But the other areas, like, say, faculty quality and all of that, there are less objective metrics, because you can't compare faculty who are doing different things, right? So we just establish kind of indicators for, say, faculty course evals. So faculty do below a certain point, then we need to have some kind of formative sessions with them. So the department chair will sit down and say, you might want to think about how you teach. So there is improvement every single part of the process. But as far as what is important for student performance, we run regression equations based on all the data. It's all de-identified, but we look at the data constantly.
Hey, awesome. So seems like you do a lot. What does your day-to-day or even your weekly routine look like?
So the one thing about faculty life, there is no routine, right? That's the part we love about it, because there is no, I cannot define my day. But I'm going to talk about pre-COVID, okay, because our whole lives got all disrupted. But typically in faculty life, I would say if I take a week, we have kind of what we call a distribution of effort. So we write in our contract what percentage of our time. So a week is about 40 hours, right? So what percentage of time are you going to spend teaching, doing scholarship or research, service? So how are you going to break up your week? So we call it a DOE, or distribution of effort. So say I say I have 20 to 25% of my time I'm going to spend in teaching. It doesn't mean that every week I'm spending it in teaching, but this is kind of an average over the year. So my day usually begins with obviously getting to the office by like 8:30, and usually it's emails, which we get bombarded with emails from everyone. So it's looking at emails and then prioritizing what needs to be done. And I usually have a plan for the week on what I need to do, and a check off, and then I sit with my support person. You all know her, Shawnee's. So we sit and figure out what I need to get done for assessment. So that's about 40% of my role. So that's 2 days a week I'm spending on assessment, um, about 1 day on teaching. So this means teaching in the classroom, or I have an outcomes research fellow, so I'm working with her, or I take students in rotation, so teaching them. So all that goes into teaching. And then scholarship, which I spend about 25% of my time on scholarship. I have about 6-7 research projects at any given time. So then I'm working with my fellow, with my students, and I'm running analysis. I'm looking at what else to do, communicating with my collaborators. So that takes another 25% of my time. And then I'm on committees. So we have the Dean's Council, which includes the college administration. I serve on the Faculty Orientation and Development Committee, also on the Assessment Committee. So all that committee work. Then I work with associations like APHA. So I'm on several committees on APHA, AACP, ISPOR, which is the International Society for Pharmacoeconomics and Outcomes Research. So I work with them. So a lot of phone calls and meetings, and then travel takes away some time too. And so I used to travel about I would say once in maybe 1.5 months roughly. That's how often I travel. So a lot to DC, to workshops, to conferences. So that's kind of how our day is, but there's no real routine because when you're in a block, it's all dedicated 100% to students, right? All my calendar gets pushed aside. It's all just the teaching and grading and prep and everything. So as faculty, it's very difficult to say that we have a routine. We try to get some rhythm so we get our work done, because we have a boss, we have someone we report to, but nobody's checking on us. Nobody's saying, oh, have you done this, have you taken care of it. It's very self-driven. So there's no routine, which is the wonderful part. There's complete freedom, almost complete freedom, autonomy, which is the part we love. So there's no routine, unfortunately, or fortunately.
You mentioned that you were given a lot of your roles or offered to a lot of the positions you've had. But prior to that, what special training was required for you to get to where you are today?
So in my case, obviously because we're in a school of pharmacy, you need to have a pharmacy background, at least in our area, right? We have some pharm faculty who don't need that, but we are all generally have a pharmacy background. So PharmD, M.Pharm, B.Pharm, whatever it is, or BS Pharm. So pharmacy background, and then I decided to pursue pharmaceutics first. In fact, I almost got a PhD in pharmaceutics before I moved. So that was my first love, pharmaceutics. I enjoyed it. I was a lab rat for like 3 years. And then I started missing that interaction with individuals, and I started gaining more interest in people related issues, right? So I saw the HPLC and the assays and the lab work, and then I said, I want to see how this impacts the other end. So that's when I decided to go in for what we call pharmaceutical administration. Is really health services research. Okay, so it's really understanding all the components which go into pharmacists working with patients. And I got a PhD. So in my area, so I'm in social administrative sciences. That's my discipline. So in my area, you need a PhD to be in academia. Okay, just like in PharmSci, you need a PhD. But for our faculty who are in the clinical and therapeutics area, like your Dr. Pon and Chan and all of the others who teach you therapeutics, they need a PharmD plus either a PGY1, or nowadays it's all PGY2. So year 2 residencies, and or a fellowship. So for example, the fellowship I run is a 2-year fellowship. Most of my fellows are now in faculty positions across the country. Then Roosevelt, High Point, different areas, and UCSD also. So so it's really dependent on the kind of work you do. So in my area, you need to have a pharmacy background, but you may or may not practice. Okay, for example, I don't practice, but I teach about practice. So I don't practice, so but for practice faculty, we have them at their sites, right? You guys will be rotating through some of those. So it really depends, but you definitely need to have a pharmacy background in my area. Like we have Dr. Rusan, who has a PharmD PhD. Dr. Lay has a PharmD PhD. So we're all in the social administrative sciences.
Okay, so you said you need a pharmacy background.
Yeah.
I want to know about like your motivation. So what was the path that helped you get to the position that you are today?
So do you mean the path to get to pharmacy school or to where I am now?
To where you are now.
Okay.
Way back in the beginning.
So I actually was slotted, I wanted to go to med school. Okay. But it was highly competitive, and I said, okay, the next best thing I'm going to go is go to pharmacy school. I was sure I was going to do something with medicine, so to speak. So I got into pharmacy school. So it was not the the direct path, but slightly indirect. So I got into pharmacy school, and then after that, I did want to get more into understanding formulations and how they work with on humans. So that's when I decided. So I had my pharmacy degree in India, and then I decided I'm going to get a PhD in pharmaceutics. That's why I came to Ohio State. the Ohio State University. And then over there, as I told you, I kind of shifted to pharmacy or health services research. And then when I finished my PhD, I was figuring out what to do because my husband had moved to LA because he's in computer graphics. So he'd moved to LA, and we were like, okay, there's not much going on in LA. There was an Amgen, which had two drugs no, Allergan had two drugs at the time. Amgen didn't have too much. It's only Epogen. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? Like, pharma industry is bleak. We only had USC at that point in terms of academia. So it was like, okay, so at that point I applied to, I knew I wanted to be a researcher wherever I was. So there is a think tank in Santa Monica. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's called RAND. So RAND Corporation is a think tank, and they do all research within the public domain. So they have research in, say, public policy, they have in defense, and then they have also in healthcare. So I just wrote to one of the researchers there, and they said, yeah, why don't you come and interview? So I did. And then I got into what we call a consultant position there. So I was consulting on research with them. And I wanted to do real research, and then they would give me, I don't even know if you guys know MOSBs anymore. Do you know MOSBs? Do you guys know what that is? It's like a list of drugs and their indications. Okay?
Not really, no.
Okay, so it's probably past pre Lexicomp era. So they gave it to me and said, can you make sure that all these drugs are on the right indication? I said, okay, that's what I went to pharmacy school for, but that's not what I got my PhD for. So it took a few months, but then I got on some really good research projects looking at quality indicators for women who had hypertension. It's actually a piece of work which is still coded because we haven't done anything further with that, but how it's asymptomatic and women tend to ignore, and that was the background for women with heart attacks and how they don't know because they never even monitor their hypertension. So that study actually helped focus more on women with cardiac issues, because prior to that, we thought that only men have a higher tendency for cardiovascular conditions. Women, even now, I don't think the focus is that high, but that was a really good project we did with RAND. And then I did a couple more before so Western was beginning then, had already begun, but they were looking for somebody to teach lectures in health systems as well as in pharmacy practice management. So I knew Dr. Prabhu from when I was in pharmaceutics, right? Long time back. So he just reached out and said, hey, heard you moved in the area. Would you mind coming and doing a lecture? And I said, I have never taught, other than being a TA. So he said, well, this is the material, see if you're familiar. So I put together these lectures, came into class, did a few, 2-3 lectures. And then they said, would you like to interview? We have an open position. So I said, all right. So I interviewed and I thought, I'll give it 2 years. 21 years later, I'm still here. So I hadn't planned on academia at all. I had planned actually, my focus was to go into industry or research and live the fast-paced life. But once I got into academia and I saw the rhythm, I just love it.
So you've consistently progressed in your career through many positions and experiences. Is there an intrinsic factor or maybe someone specifically that motivates you to keep striving for your next endeavor?
Wow. That's a very loaded question, Mallory, but a very good question. Has to give me thought. I don't think that question was given to me. Okay.
It just kind of came up.
That's great. So I would say it's not just me, but if you talk to anyone who, progresses through their career, there has to be an inner motivation, right? You have to feel driven. So I would say the one thing, no matter where you are, right? It doesn't matter what role you take, what setting, passion. You have to have the passion which sustains you, because we're all in professional careers. And if you didn't feel passionate about that area, sustaining it for the next 20, 30 years can be a total drag, right? Because then it becomes like I clock in, clock out. It's boring. You really need to have the passion for what you're doing. So we all came into healthcare for helping patients, for working with patients to make their lives better. That is something which sustains us. And now we see with the COVID and stuff, that is something which is constantly going to sustain us, because we really want to, right, do something for our patients in whatever mechanism that you can, right? We have people in public health, we have people in nursing, pharmacy. We've seen in our college, in our campus too. So Intrinsically, the motivation is passion, and the inherent motivation to do something for others, I would say. The second, I think, is attitude. And I know you were probably looking more specific things, but I would say along with passion, the attitude matters a lot. You can teach people skills. I can teach you how to poke your finger and take, like someone's blood sugar. I can teach you guys to take BP. I cannot teach you how to be with a positive attitude. That comes from within, right? So I would say attitude is something which is very, very important. So when I hired a lot of the faculty, we're talking about now, I hired them, and that is what we look for is, do you have the right attitude into any whatever profession you have taken in? You have the passion, your attitude, meaning are you willing to learn, right? Or are you just set in your ways? No, I'm not going to change, right? So you have to be adaptive, flexible, open to learning, lifelong learning, which we talk about as one of our core values, and the ability to take constructive criticism. None of us is perfect. We're always learning. So if people say, this was not done well, how to not take it personally. And we talk about the growth mindset as an ELSA, to really look at it and say, okay, I know it hurt when somebody said, hey, you didn't do the best job. Of course it's going to hurt. We are human beings. But how to take the best of it and say, okay, I know I didn't do a good job. What did I miss? How can I learn from it and get better? So the constant ability to improve on the product, on yourself, I think that's important. And to really the also attitude. And then the other thing I would think is constantly look at how you communicate. And I'm not talking about standing there and being very articulate. When I say communicate, it goes along with your attitude. When you talk to other people, how do you treat other people? How do you really interact with them? And do you give them respect, right? Because you want respect. Everybody you treat with respect, you trust what people do. So that interaction, the interpersonal skills as we loosely define it, is very, very important. The whole concept of EQ, as you guys have kind of learned a little bit about it, it's I would say it's even more important than all the skills you have, because it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have, if people don't accept that from you, it goes nowhere, right? So how you interact with people, how you communicate with them, you respect them, you treat them with respect, uber important. So that's another thing I would say, which I personally keep looking to improve. And then of course I have had amazing mentors throughout my life, and all of us do. Okay, so I'm not unique in this. It's just that we don't always recognize who to ask, what to ask, and how to really reach out to them. And I learned a lesson when I was in grad school. We used to be kind of not, I'm not a shy person, but I used to feel kind of really awkward to go up to people in conferences and ask them questions. And my advisor, who's been a huge impact on my life, and he's retired now, but he would say, you need to go to the source, as in you need to approach the person you want to and think, what's the worst that can happen? They won't talk to me. Big deal. You're at ground zero then, right? But what can you gain if you go up to them, approach them, and ask them the right questions? So it's really important to ask people the right questions, because everybody, as you're seeing now, loves to talk about themselves, right? You ask me a question, I'll sit here and talk all day about what I did in my life. So people love to talk about themselves and what they do. So it's asking the right questions and being open to receiving the information from them. So whether it's someone who's a mentor, or whether it's somebody you meet at a meeting, or you're networking. So what do we mean by networking? You talk to people. So the idea is, the more you ask questions, the more you get informed from them, because some of the experiences people have, you cannot learn from a book, a video. I mean, you guys have so many more resources than we had, YouTube videos, and you have all these like blogs and things. But some of that comes from just interacting with people in whatever way, right? Even if it's a blog, but you need to ask the right questions. So I would say motivation, like passion, motivation, attitude, communication, and mentorship. I think that's, I would say, and none of this is magic, right? We all have to work really, really hard. So put in your effort every single day, whatever you do. And I tell the students in my class too, you do it the first time, you do it right. You don't have to repeat it, right? And you put in your best effort in whatever you do every single minute of your life. Because like my what do you say? What do you call that? My mantra in life is carpe diem. So, which you guys know means seize the day, but it's really seizing every moment. Whatever you do it meaningfully, because that minute when it's gone, it's gone. It's left your life. You're never going to have it again. So do what is important to you and do it with full fervor. So that's pretty much what I would say.
Wow, you're like a motivational speaker.
Oh, very flattering, Mary.
So let me just take it back a little bit. You said you came into Western when it was still really new, and it's changed a lot. You watched it grow. So what do you think is the future job outlook for people that want to get into academia?
So as long as we have people who are interested in pharmacy, academics will have jobs, right? Because we always have schools and colleges of pharmacy where you are here to disseminate that information. We went through, I would say, we until say 2000, and I can't remember the exact date, maybe 2005, 6, we had about 70, 75 schools of pharmacy across the country. Wow. For the longest time. And then now we are at 142 and counting. Okay, so we grew phenomenally. And when you examine the reasons, part of it is that we came in 1998, the entire profession or entire academy went clinical. So we used to be a bachelor of pharmacy. Now we all did, went PharmD. Okay, and California has always been PharmD, but it's very clinical. And then we recognized that there was a need for more pharmacists because people started taking more medications. We had more medications. So the need for pharmacists grew. So where did the pharmacists come from? So we had pharmacy schools. And the growth was very, very steep. And the thing is, at some point, maybe around the time we hit about 110, 115, we all started saying, you know what, I think now we need to plateau, right? We're growing too many. And what happens when you grow too many pharmacists? What happens if you have too many? Saturation, and then you don't get placed, right? When pharmacists, graduates don't get placed. So we're like, this is not a service to the profession if you just have too many people coming out and not enough jobs. So then you need to make sure that there's enough placements, right? And then the profession is going through this whole, modification where we don't consider dispensing as the only option, right? We're going into more clinical services. We have provider status. We are expanding the profession into something where the outlook is now patient care on an independent individual level. So how many positions can we support? And do we have too many schools of pharmacy? So we've been doing a lot of introspection within the pharmacy schools. And obviously the ones who've been here before, the established schools will say, oh, the new ones need to go, right? But who's to say the new ones are not doing well? So the profession is really, the academy, as we call it, all the schools of pharmacy are going through a lot of introspection to say, what is it that makes us better? How do we attract students? So I would say for the past 3 or 4 years, we've seen a dip in the applicant pool across the country. Okay, and that is a combination of reasons. Basically, there's a lot of pharmacy schools, so every student who applies might pretty much get in, right? That's one thing. So you don't see as many applicants per school. The second is the tuition, right? With the economy, a lot of people start saying this is very difficult. Even if you're in a public school, it's still like $28,000 to $30,000 per year. It's difficult to get a loan. And then how justified is it? Is it justifying the salary you make after pharmacy school? People start asking questions. So it's the national discussion on student debt. So with all that, I think the future for the profession, we're right now at a point where, as we call it, it's a marketplace adjustment. When things get too tough, the schools which are really good and have been successful, they will survive. But for some schools, I don't know if you guys know what happened with law schools a few years back. Too many law schools. Every corner you had a law school. And then when there were too many lawyers, there were not enough jobs, there was a lot of frustration, few law schools closed down. Okay, and we don't know if that's going to happen. But right now, the academy is looking into making sure that our standards are high. So just because we have so many schools doesn't mean we should lower the quality of the profession and take everyone, right? Because you want to make sure that the graduates we have are top class graduates, because they're working with patients' lives. We need to make sure that everyone who comes into the profession is really very good, right? So you maintain the quality standards, and you maintain the quality standards, but how do you do that when you don't have enough people in the class? Okay, we have seen schools across the country have 25-30% dip in their applicants, so they're not filling the class. What do you do then, right? So these are some of the discussions we're having. So there's definitely a good outlook, because out of a class of 100, you may have 1 or 2 people who are interested in academia, who finally get to academia. Okay, it's, most of you will go out there and find positions in pharmacies, independent or chains, so community pharmacies, AmCare clinics, hospitals. I just looked at all our data, and it's still the highest number goes to chain pharmacies. And then we have inpatient settings, we have managed care, so that trickle has begun towards managed care too. So most students, most graduates go into those professions, and then you have 1 or 2 people who go towards academia. Okay, and then you may have a couple of people go into a PhD or law school and then go into that career. So given that, the prospects for academic positions is still not too bad.
Gave me a lot to think about. So based on the time, I think I want to open it up to students if they have any questions. So I'll hand it off to Kevin and let him take over.
Thank you,
Hi,
ma'am.
Dr. Law.
Hi, Kevin.
So just a few questions from some of our students. One of the questions is, do you see managed care as a growing opportunity for newly graduate placement?
So again, it's a question I have to answer with a dose of balance, because until last year, I would have said absolutely. I teach the kind of one of the last classes which sees managed care before you guys go out, because in my 6304, we have modules on managed care and PBMs, and we have people coming in who, talk to you guys, and they run rotations, they're employers. So we've seen an increased interest in managed care among our students, okay, which is a great thing. And the jobs are there. You might need a residency, or sometimes you go in if you really like data crunching. A lot of managed care positions for pharmacists, unless you're talking managed care like Kaiser, where you are actually interacting with patients. But managed care positions as such are desk jobs, right? So you're analyzing data, you're looking at what kind of medications are being prescribed. So you do utilization management, which is something you guys will do in the P3 year. So you look at all the data, and then you try to predict what happens with your patients, or you're looking at which drugs cost the most. You're conducting formulary benefit designs. So a lot of the behind the scenes data analysis is what you're doing. Analytics is what you're doing. Now, the jobs were really good. And then, of course, you have managed care pharmacists who are doing telehealth, who've been doing telehealth for a long time, who do drug information. And then they're also working with patients on, especially if they're attached to a mail order facility, they're working with patients on, answering, information questions for the patients, making sure patients are on the right regimens, communicating with physicians. So there's a lot of different jobs. And then if you have mail order, you can also be a mail order pharmacist or a managed care pharmacist. Now, this year, was it last year? No, early this year, Governor Newsom, especially in California, he signed this bill where he basically said he took off all PBMs for Medicaid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Medicaid goes directly from the state government. So what happened then is, now you have all these pharmacists who are in the Medicaid managed care, right, with IEHP, CalOptima, LA Care, who are now, they're slowly taking them out of the scene. So where does it put these pharmacists? Okay, so that's one question we still haven't answered, because after that COVID hit, we don't know what's going to happen after COVID, right? Mm-hmm. Because Newsom's priorities have changed, and of course, as we rebuild after the pandemic, we have to really figure out what are our priorities. California has taken a huge hit on its budget, right, on its finances. So we have to see what is important, how are we going to provide healthcare. So there are some unanswered questions, but managed care is never a bad option, because no matter, even if say we say, okay, he says no PBMs, right? Somebody has to still manage the patient's medications, right? And who better than you guys? Right? So as such, I don't see it going away, but I see it resetting and coming up with a new life. And I don't know exactly what that life will be, but if you ask, if I'm asked to predict, then I'd say it'll be an evolved version where we'll have a little bit more telehealth, and some of the analytics that we were doing, we will still be doing for the state, but maybe not a PBM, is what I'm
Okay.
thinking. So I think the opportunities are not bad. It's just the way we define managed care might slightly change.
That's true. Everything's always evolving, right? As time
Mm-hmm.
goes by.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned LA Care, CalOptima, and like IEHP. So does your position at Western U, like, do you have like a certain connection to them? Like, are you able to interact with them on behalf of the
So,
school?
so I've interacted with them on my research projects, and then residencies. So they've come and asked us how to set up residencies, work with them. Dr. Hata and I have worked with them pretty closely. Dr. Hata has conducted actual like patient care with them, and I have been involved more in looking at like the research protocols or how to set it up. So, and then we also invite some of them as speakers, right? Like when the students invite as speakers, so we interact with them. So it's been more and as an academic, and also they run rotations, I run rotations, so sometimes we talk about what kind of rotations. So it's more from that level, but I used to interact with them, I think, a lot more before than I do now, because I used to be involved more with I was the AMCP chapter advisor for the initial 4 years. So it was I was the first chapter advisor. So I used to interact a lot with them, because NIDA managed care, all of this, we used to constantly communicate.
Probably one more question just for the sake of time. So do you have any insights for students interested in entering that segment of pharmacy, like managed care in general? Like you kind of mentioned it before, but is there any tips or advice you can give them?
So one of the things I'd say for sure is pay attention to all the managed care components in the classroom. But that doesn't mean you forget your clinical, right? You absolutely need to know your drugs. But in addition, I would say avail of rotations in managed care companies or PBMs, whatever the case may be. Definitely look for non-traditional rotations, because being in a managed care consulting company or a PBM or whatever like form it takes, right? The insights you get in that hands-on learning, you can't get in the classroom. It's just wonderful to learn from them. And I used to have one of the lecturers who came in, who doesn't anymore, but she used to run a consulting company, and she was our first managed care rotation offering. Debbie, gosh, what was her last name? I've even forgotten the last name. How terrible is that? It used to be Our Experts was the company. I was actually a founder, and she used to talk to the students about preparing the dossiers, the monographs, right? And it was such valuable experience. Students who went on rotations actually were involved in preparing these dossiers. You had to go through the MCP format and all of that. So you'll be doing the monographs for the in the curriculum, right? So we used to have them look through them, give us ideas on what kind of drugs we should include. So it's very helpful to go for a rotation.
Okay. So for any other students that weren't able to ask their question, what's the best way to contact you, Dr. Law?
Email, anytime. I'm always online, I would say, like the rest of you.